I'm Eric V, and you're listening to the Real Radar Radio Show, episode 51. Welcome to a brand new episode of the Real Radar Radio Show, guys. Thank you so much for joining me today, or coming in today to listen to the show. It means a lot. I'm actually very excited to be doing this episode. I've been looking forward to doing this specific episode for quite some time now because, well, for me, I guess you have to, for me, it means that much more because with this particular episode, I've been kind of holding off onto when I'll be able to do something on this sort of level by means of doing a retrospect episode on the Halloween franchise. Now, in the past, I've talked about the Friday the 13th franchise, the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, the Scream franchise, and I have yet to touch base on the Halloween franchise due to the fact that I just think it needed more time to relish in what it is that I was trying to talk about, and what I was talking about in retrospect of just the series, the franchise on its own. So it actually seemed to work out for the best because when I decided to do this show, this particular episode, I found myself thinking about doing more extravagant coverage just solely on this one particular episode. But after thinking about it for quite some time, and I think what kind of helped me in the long run was holding off on doing this episode, was because I really wanted to see how things would play out within the past few weeks of how I was going to set up a new episode, how I was going to get things going, how I was going to set things up for a new episode. Well, initially, what I wanted to do with this episode 51 was I wanted it to be something more along the lines of what horror movie, what horror genre, what horror franchise was I going to discuss. And I know a lot of people have mentioned to me in the past that I should talk about today's modern horror. And when it came down to me ultimately deciding to do this episode, especially solely based on the Halloween franchise, I initially stepped back from it because I didn't want to do it. But it just seemed to work out because, and I think it was a weird way of me sneaking in this episode above doing a modern slasher film. Could it survive in today's society, and what could today's society learn from the slasher film of the 80s and 90s? Well, in particular, I was thinking about the Halloween franchise as one of those contenders and one of those key fits and key factors that could have contributed to that particular episode. Well, it just so happened that Universal Studios and John Carpenter's Halloween, this continuation of the story, the new 2018 Halloween with Jamie Lee Curtis, just started dropping teasers for a trailer reveal, which is due today, Friday. So if you're listening to this now, it's Friday, June the 8th. And by now, if you haven't seen the Halloween trailer, it is by all means dynamic in all aspects. I mean, I feel that you get the authentic feel of Michael Myers stepping back into this framework that he's been so iconically known for. Something that he's been known for quite some time. Now, the franchise on its own has so many ups and downs and so many bugaboos and so many errors in continuity and story plot lines. And I'll get to that later in this episode. But the one thing that stood out from me for this trailer was that there was just so much more closeness, so much more writing upon the fact of the story that Michael is after Laurie for a more personal, specific reason. And when I found out that Danny McBride and David Gordon Green were behind this project for the new Halloween, it seemed a little vague for me, because Danny McBride is one of many talents and trades as a comedic actor, and I've never known him to be some sort of a writer or any sorts of that. I mean, aside from Eastbound and Down, which he did for HBO. And now I'm looking at this as this is a really awesome opportunity for someone who is a fan of the franchise, such as McBride, to actually jump in on this story, because him, along with David Gordon Green, who's been very vocal about his involvement in the Halloween franchise since maybe 2016, in his aspirations to redo, not so much redo, but kind of add on to the story that is the Halloween franchise. So I actually found an initial rough draft of the script online, and I read a few snippets of it, and from what I can just read off, based off that specific rough draft, which I'm more than likely is not a part of the actual story itself, but from what I saw, was probably one of the best things that I've read, coming from an actor whose repertoire and whose resume includes just acting. And when I started reading this rough draft, I was taken aback from the initial rough draft that I read for the first Halloween. So this continuation that's carrying on in the franchise itself, this being a continuation of the Halloween franchise, ignoring previous installments of the Halloween franchise after Halloween 2. This is taking place 40 years after the original Halloween. So every other iteration in the Halloween franchise is somehow, shape, and form a part of this storyline, or part of this franchise in another way, shape, or form. The main thing to take away from this franchise already, that the Halloween franchise is implementing with this installment in the franchise, this new installment, is that it's ignoring the whole motive that Michael and Laurie are siblings. So there's a doing away of that happening right now, that there's no longer siblings, that there's some sort of reason behind Michael going back for Laurie to come back and, seek his plot against her, or somehow find a way to get back at her or do something, retaliate. But 40 years, the 40-year gap between the original and this new installment is going to be fresh. It's going to be something unknown to a lot of people, because not a lot of people were sold on the fact that Rob Zombie had pretty much butchered his reimagining of the Halloween franchise. And the first Halloween remake that came out from Rob Zombie was pretty great, was pretty good. I was a big fan of that one. I really liked it. I couldn't get enough of that movie. I would watch it almost every other week. I had a Kick-Ass poster T-shirt of that movie. I was one of those freaks, if you will, that downloaded the soundtrack just to listen to, and when he wasn't doing anything other than trying to crank out a story or write something or whatever it may be. But when Rob Zombie decided to do a sequel to that, it just lost me on so many other factors, because the involvement of the White Horse and the involvement of so many other things, the original Michael, young Michael that played the young Michael Myers in the film, wasn't involved. They had some other kid that looked just like him, but just wasn't just him. It threw me off, and it was just so different, and it was just that continuity just ruined it for me. You know, the implication knowing that the girl who played Laurie Strode, Scout Taylor Compton, in this remake for Rob Zombie, she was pretty much traumatized from this experience, and she was just beyond gone in this sequel, and meant so much more because the other actor, Danielle Harris, who's also an actress in the sequel, shows that she was also, you know, traumatized and once in a different way, and it showed in the films. So, but when you actually go back and watch them again, this whole involvement of the White Horse and all this other shit, that it kind of just didn't make sense with Rob Zombie, and, you know, finding a way to implement, you know, his wife Sherry Moon Zombie, and the way it just didn't come together with this whole White Horse theory, and there was just it just became a big old mess in the second part. But I do have high praise for the first one. It was very gory, very well approached. The story was very strong. It was very subtle. It wasn't, you know, stagnant. It wasn't leaking any plot points. There was a lot to go off on that story. It's just the second part of that Rob Zombie continuation and his verse. It just didn't add up, or just didn't really make sense in that particular sense. So, I mean, by all means, hands down, the original Halloween franchise, the very first John Carpenter one, is the best one, and you can't go wrong with the John Carpenter imagining of the Halloween story. But this Rob Zombie one was supposedly leaked to be part of a third film. It had a bunch of production delays. Mustafa Akkad, who's also been a production executive producer on the whole franchise itself since the very first Halloween, you know, expressed his dislike towards the direction of the Rob Zombie way, and how that kind of thing just fell out, and it just didn't happen. So I'm kind of glad that the third installment in the Halloween franchise didn't happen the way that, you know, Rob Zombie was actually kind of wanting to approach it, with the revisitation of, you know, Haddonfield, and revisitation of a more insight put into the whole White Horse theory and what it really means, and how we're going to continue on into this fray of what it truly means. I think it was just a good idea on its own for that verse to just stop and continue in general. I mean, there was no need for us to peel back another layer of the Halloween franchise and what we could have done and what we could have seen going on based off what Rob Zombie wrote and what he truly wanted to approach in this series. Now, this new iteration, the one that I'm truly a big fan of, saying that this is going to be taking place 40 years after the original Halloween, totally ignoring everything that happened after the original, you know, part 2 through Resurrection, through H2O. All of those are just expunged, pretty much. It's kind of like a gap in the timeline, if you will, that these things kind of just don't really add up. I mean, in one story we had the fact that Jamie Lee Curtis had a son played by Josh Hartnett in Halloween H2O, and then, you know, they were at this boarding school or this campus or this college thing, and you know, now she has a daughter in this new story. She has a daughter and a granddaughter. So now it's kind of like, you know, how did we get here? You know, how did this shit happen? You know, a lot of diehard fans, you know, of the franchise would like to know, you know, hey, what happened to Josh Hartnett's character? Is there any mention? Are we even visiting that notion? Are we not touching it? Are we going to ignore the fact that you've already Jamie Lee Curtis died in the previous Halloween movie? I mean, are we going to address that in any way, shape, or form? I mean, if this is just a continuation after the 40 years, after the first Halloween, and we're ignoring everything that happened before that, well then, okay, I see that. But on a real world view level, where you've actually seen these films on a Friday the 13th, you know, on a random Friday the 13th, you know, Friday night, or on a Halloween night, you know, we're just having a scary movie marathon, and you're watching these films back to back, and you notice that things are lining up and not really lining up. In what point do you realize this shit is not making any fucking sense? And for me, I want to know if there's any mention of, you know, any past storylines, anything that happened beyond this. Are we going to just completely ignore other iterations? I mean, if we're doing away with the whole sibling thing, are we totally doing away with the whole story continuation? That's the most important thing that I want to know. And based off this trailer alone, it seems that there may be room for explanation for previous films. If I'm not the only one that caught that on just based on this trailer. I mean, if there's other people out there that, if you're listening to this show and you're listening to this podcast, this particular episode, and you truly feel like there might be something else underlying within the trailer that might seem like there should be like a mention or discussion of other things in the series, or if you think that the trailer speaks to you in a way that it kind of wants to mention previous installments but not so much, get at me. Leave a comment or send me a message on Instagram or Twitter, and let me know what you guys think. I mean, I truly think that this is going to be a big gap, or a big, you know, leap in the storyline in itself. I mean, obviously it is already. We're going 40 years past the original. We're ignoring the fact that these two are siblings. We're on this different level of knowing that every installment in the series is just going to be ignored. We're just going to just walk away from this. I guess Michael Myers no longer has a niece. No longer has any connections to Josh Hartnett's character. Any other things that we've mentioned in the franchise as a whole. The whole fact that, you know, there was no longer a part 2, you know, him chasing her in the hospital in Halloween 2, and pretty much events taking place in the same night of Halloween while she's at the hospital. Are we ignoring all that? Are we subtracting his kill count as a also? I mean, like, he's got like an extended kill count of people he's murdered between the second installment and Halloween H2O and Halloween Resurrection. I mean, there's just so many other people that he's murdered. I guess his kill count goes back down to, I don't know, how many people did he kill in the original? I want to say maybe 5, 6. It's just a rough estimate. Yeah, maybe like 5 or 6 is like a rough estimate of how many people he's actually killed in the first one. I mean, if it just so happened to be that he got away at the end of Halloween, and, you know, he wasn't, you know, found, or he just somehow got away, how was he captured? How was he arrested? How was he brought back to, you know, the hospital where he needed to get treatment, and he was, you know, locked up for 40 years, and he just somehow broke out on the 40th anniversary of, you know, what had happened, just to come back and seek his revenge on a elderly grandma, Jamie Lee Curtis. And what does that mean for Blumhouse Productions, and what does that mean for the franchises continuing? Oh, is this the final confrontation we have between Jamie Lee Curtis and Michael Myers? Is this going to be the final bout of the Halloween franchise? Is this going to put the cap on the series and the franchise as a whole? That's it. We're not getting any more. This is it. This is the final Halloween. This is it. I want to know, is this going to be the final one? Is it for everything? I mean, if it truly is, congratulations. The franchise did an outstanding turn at the box office, had an amazing run with horror fans that will resonate for generations to come, and for new horror fans who can appreciate the old lackluster feel and the thrills that these films brought to audiences of the 70s and 80s and 90s, and along with those horror fans of today's generation who just so happen to get their knocks off of a movie based on a fucking haunted doll, or a Conjuring movie with a scary ass nun who just looks kind of like a cracked up, cross between Pennywise the Clown and circus freak. I don't know. I mean, it goes on. Today's horror genre for me just doesn't cut it with The Conjuring and Annabelle and stupid shit like this. The Purge. The Purge was a great idea for one film, and that's it. Now we have the first Purge coming out in July. The first Purge, wasn't the first Purge already? Didn't it already happen with Ethan Hawke? Can we just not make any more Purge movies? Purge election year, Purge this, Purge anarchy. I don't know, all these other things that just don't make sense to me, that are supposed to be scary, that are supposed to be haunted, that are supposed to be classified as the horror genre, just don't really put it or make out to what it seems to be. I mean, are we really going to just let these films like The Conjuring and Annabelle and what was that stupid The Gallows with Charlie and all this other shit? That shit doesn't make sense. This remake of Stephen King's It was fantastic. It was beyond amazing. It was awesome. It was right on the money. It was a great film. I'm all in for that one. I'm all in for movies like Lights Out. Lights Out was pretty much very original, very down to earth, very, straightforward, straight to the point. Other movies like White Noise, other movies like the continuation of the Child's Play franchise, still strong, still going in today's generation, and it's being appreciated by a lot of old fans of the franchise and new fans who just so happen to jump aboard this horror train, but don't really know the dynamics and the basics of what it truly means to be a fan of the horror genre. To appreciate the classics, I guess you have to have like a preferred taste in what do you truly think is classified as a great film. And I'm not saying that y'all's opinion or taste in movies like suck or anything. It's just that I just don't see how you could be a fan of a haunted doll when it's already been done by Child's Play. I mean, and of course the doll Annabelle doesn't talk, doesn't move, or it moves sometimes. It's just it just stares at you. I mean, if you had a doll that was talking shit and pretty much talking you like Child's Play, then yeah, I'm all in for it. That's a badass film because you're dealing with humor, you're dealing with terror, you're dealing with fright. But I mean, films like this, today's films, just pretty much rely on jump scares and things that just don't make sense, like music crescendoing and ultimately leading to this big surprise, the big reveal. That sucks. That's shitty. For me, in my own opinion. Back then, we watched films, and yeah, you heard, when you were watching Friday the 13th, you heard you heard Jason's, approach. You heard, Freddy's upbeat laugh or the the upbeat music note play 1-2 seconds and then go away, and then finally we get a big scare, or yeah, something along the lines of that happening. And now today it's like, you know, the music crescendoing, you know it's going to happen for a reason because it's going to happen. Catch them off guard. You don't know when things are going to just pop off and scare the shit out of you. And I just don't see how it all makes any sense. I mean, I just don't. Films like 28 Days Later, 28 Weeks Later, Night of the Living Dead, Land of the Dead, Dawn of the Dead, these remakes that were made by, what's his name? Freaking Zack Snyder, when he did Dawn of the Dead in 2004. Very well approached. He took a great amount of consistency in his knowledge of zombies and his way of filming and approaching, you know, this certain type of style that he does in almost every movie. If you really pay close attention to 300, Watchmen, Man of Steel, Batman vs. Superman, Justice League, on some of the reshoots, he's got a very primitive and extended approach to how he approaches these films, with a certain style and a certain way of not only telling the story, but in a very bleak and monotone way of presenting it to you, the audience. Now, I truly, honestly feel that, you know, today's horror genre could use some spicing up, could use some lifting, could use something more other than The Conjuring, a haunted house, and all this other stuff that was based on Ed and Lorraine Warren, people cashing in on that whole craze and whatever direction that goes, and how people really truly want to see that film and how things are being perceived by that. I just don't see it. People go and waste money at the theaters to watch shit like that just don't make any sense to me. It doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. This installment of the Halloween franchise, whether it be the last installment ever, because it's being cited as Laurie Strode's final confrontation with Michael Myers, whether it be her last confrontation with, you know, with Michael, whether it's going to be the last film in the franchise for forever, we're never going to get a Halloween movie again, so be it. But I just know that my level of comfortability and my level of knowing that a film like this caliber, such as the Halloween franchise, with this specific installment, still hitting generations and still hitting the box office after many years, after already being the 40th anniversary of the original Halloween franchise, coming out so many years ago, and now finally capping off and about to set off into the sunset. No longer going to be any more films, you know, following this. And I'm okay with that. And I'm okay with this possibly being one of the last dying breeds or the last dying franchises of the horror genre. But for what it's worth, everything that this franchise has brought to many horror fans, myself included, many restless nights where we couldn't sleep because we've actually had actual true fucking nightmares of, you know, this thing coming into our room and pretty much killing us. Having nightmares from being a little kid to growing up and appreciating it, the film as a whole, because, you know, that was damn good movie writing. That's damn good screenwriting. I never truly appreciated the Scream franchise until I was a little older, and then I realized, you know what, this really did revitalize the horror genre of the 90s. This really did turn everything that we knew in horror movies as a cliche and turned it on its head and used it to benefit from everything and made the horror genre a whole lot better. And I could go on for hours talking about the Scream franchise and my theories behind that, and you guys know this. You guys know that I can seriously sit down, talk about the franchise, dig into what I think could have been, what I think was, what could have happened, what might have happened, what should have happened, and the list goes on and on. But again, like I said, this Halloween film might be possibly the last dying franchise of this generation, no longer being somehow relevant to today's audience, and there no longer being a continuation in the series breaks my heart, and it sucks because I truly love these classic horror films, and they speak on so many levels where you can just get really hyped up about these approaches to the film and these different ways of how original storytelling was about back in the day, and what it was really what really made it more interesting was how people growing up back then in the 70s and 80s truly were terrified of this certain type of story. And like I said, today's modern horror is just doesn't cut it, for me at least. For me at least. I mean, I will refuse to watch any films that have to do with The Conjuring or Annabelle, The Nun, any other shit that I've mentioned in the past that are part of today's horror, The Gallows, Unfriended, Friend Requested, dumb shit like that. I just can't get behind. It just doesn't make any sense to me. I will never be a fan of this because I just don't agree with it. I appreciate everyone's taste and their affection for these films, and I respect that. I do. You guys are entitled to your own opinions, entitled to your own beliefs on how you feel about these films, and that's great. That makes you probably better than myself and appreciating these films and the craft and the passion for it. That's great and everything, but for me, I just don't see how relevant and how it just makes any sense. But again, like I said, kudos to you guys for all that. Going back to capping off this episode for the Halloween franchise and the series, a lot of things have happened throughout the franchise, throughout so many years. Like I said, Paul Rudd was somehow involved in it. I forgot his other name. Joseph Gordon-Levitt also had a hand in it. There was so many bloopers that go along with the original Halloween franchise. The original Halloween, with the first installment, the very first Halloween movie. There's many other things that happened along with, other things that could have happened down the road. Like I said, this may not be the last installment in this series. It's over. It could be over, and that's okay. We all have to move on sometime. Things just don't work out for the best. I mean, look at the Friday the 13th franchise. Friday the 13th had so many things going with them. New Line Cinema was behind this, bought the rights off from Paramount, came back to New Line Cinema. Platinum Dunes made their own 2009 film. A lot of people were mixed about that, but I think it was a really good film. I think it was really good, really received. Very gory, very straightforward, very modernized to today's society that people could be, appreciative of. But, I mean, there was just a lot of people that just didn't see eye to eye to this one. Then Platinum Dunes turns around and purchases Nightmare on Elm Street from New Line Cinema once again. Tries to make it about themselves. 2010 hits. You hire Samuel Bayer to direct Nightmare on Elm Street with Jackie Earle Haley headlining this titular character, who, by the way, played a damn good haunting version of Freddy Krueger. But having a director who's never made a feature film, who's just done nothing but music videos up until that point, kind of just set off everything else into a frenzy of how things just didn't work out. Jackie Earle Haley signed an agreement and a contract to do 3-4 films as Freddy Krueger. That deal fell through, never happened. Fast forward to a couple years after that, you have the star of A Nightmare on Elm Street, Rooney Mara, turn around and say that movie was shit and she regretted doing it. Now, what does that tell you about how things were perceived? Samuel Bayer, as a director, did okay, in my opinion. He did, pretty okay. I found the film to be pretty relevant, pretty, clean cut. A lot of plot holes. One too many plot holes to actually consider, one film to be on an average of plot holes. But this one kind of just set the standard back just a little bit because it just didn't really make some sense in some areas. I think that Jackie Earle Haley's Freddy Krueger was overlooked as, as what he was, but he was actually, I actually thought it was a really good interpretation of the character, and I think it should have and could have deserved a new, different approach of what I think could have been a great thing. Now, let's not go to say that maybe it can be saved. Maybe there's other things that down the road that can be explained in some way, shape, or form. And just like the Halloween franchise, maybe somehow, some way, other films could be saved later down the road with an original character, an original cast, and an original continuation of the story. Who knows? Maybe somehow, way, shape, or form, Robert Englund at 71 years old will agree to jump on the bandwagon and don the makeup again once more, but have somebody else do the stunts for him. I don't know. Today's society and the digital form and today's storytelling is far beyond our imagination. It's far beyond our far beyond our technological advances and modern filmmaking. Things that we couldn't envision 20, 30 years ago now seems just like a click or two away on a computer, and how things can just happen, all of a sudden. And that's what makes this storytelling in today's society a little more difficult than what it was and how simple it seemed back in the day. Now, I mean, like I said, the Halloween franchise is on its last leg, possibly. This is like Cher on her farewell tour. She's been saying farewell for 30 years, but the Halloween franchise is just about to be another one and done, and that's it. You don't get no more. Unless there's plans to continue the story on past, this Michael Myers character. And maybe we're going to see, the death of Laurie Strode, but we're going to see somehow a continuation after her granddaughter or after her daughter, something along the lines of that. Who knows? Maybe things could happen and it all makes sense. And on the long run, it all makes sense at the box office. And whether this, I'm sure, will be a great big hit at the blockbuster for the studio, for Jamie Lee Curtis, for the franchise. It would also mean there's a want and a desire for more installments in the franchise. Just not right away, but maybe later on down the road. Maybe there will be a true remake down the road of the franchise. Maybe there will be a continuation. Maybe there will be a spin-off. Maybe there'll be some sort of a continuation in a different sense that we can truly agree on. Both today's modern horror fans and those of yesterday. Those of yesteryear, or however you want to put it. For what it's worth, I truly do believe that this Halloween franchise is going to be the first of many to set off a trend of original casting, original storytelling to be brought back into the horror genre. Not just in Hollywood, you see different films being remade, rehashed, reimagined, redone, so many different ways. But I think this film in particular is going to be the one that truly caps it all off, that truly starts off a new trend, if you will, that I think will be a great thing. I mean, you're going to have so many other, properties. Maybe The Exorcist will come back to film. Maybe we'll see something else in The Exorcist verse. Maybe we'll see something else later down the road. Friday the 13th, maybe there's going to be another installment. Maybe we're going to have a new, fresh outing with Jason as a title character. Maybe there's going to be something behind all that. Maybe we're going to have something more along the lines of another Jeepers Creepers, a first two hit and a third fail. Who knows? But what I truly believe and what I truly know is that I will always have this passion and this appreciation for these franchises and for these horror movies, because it's those movies that we grew up on. It's those movies that we learned to appreciate. It's those movies that we've had those terrible, terrible nightmares about, but we still managed to be very assertive and very welcoming of these, because as much as we hated them, as much as we feared them growing up, as you get older, you realize these movies were just so badass. And I just think it's going to be a great thing for this Halloween franchise to cap off this era of a series and of this whole wide span movies of throughout the years, and maybe start off something new later down the road for other properties. And there's other films to look forward to in the future. There's a film titled Searching that stars John Chow from the Harold and Kumar movies. It's going to be doing theaters pretty soon. This other film that I just seen commercials for left and right that is being praised as one of the scariest films of all time, Hereditary with Toni Collette, looks very terrifying, looks very awesome. I truly want to see this one. It looks very, very haunting, very frightening. Looks very psychological, very twisted, if you will. And we also have, the chapter 2 of the It movie, when Pennywise returns to theaters next year. It's going to be a great upcoming for horror in the upcoming months. We have a lot to look forward to, and I truly am very excited for future installments in the horror genre. I mean, I truly am. Just not anything Conjuring. You know what you do. You get what I'm saying. Honestly, it just doesn't really do anything for me. But thank you guys so much for listening to episode 51 of the Real Radar Radio Show. I hope you enjoyed me ranting about all this and somehow maybe agree with me along the way. If not, it's cool. Like I said, y'all are entitled to your own opinions. Opinions are like assholes. Everybody's got one, right? That didn't make sense. At least it sounded less stupider in my head. Again, thank you guys for listening to the episode. Be sure to check out past episodes that are available on iTunes, Spreaker, and now on YouTube. I will be coming to Spotify and iHeartRadio very soon. Still pending approval. We'll see how that goes. I will see you guys on episode 52. You guys have a great weekend, a great week. I appreciate you guys. Be sure to check out the I Am Creator-thon 8 today at 2 p.m. Friday, or June 8th, 2018, 2 p.m. You guys have a great one. I'll see y'all later.